It's about two drug addicts on a bus, and one of them's fleeing Vancouver to get away from bad shit that happened. And he met up with this other guy on the bus, and together they're traveling across Canada. How the hell do you guys read up here in this light anyway? And I'm really, well, I gotta say, I'm also very impressed with the slam poets who have all that shit memorized, because I've got pages here, and it's typed out, and I'm gonna have a hard enough time with this, but anybody can memorize that shit, my hat's off to you. I'm truly impressed.
It's all the drugs.
So I'm gonna stumble along through this and try to get through it. Across the prairies they traveled. Oh, and the main character of the story is called Dragon, hence Chase the Dragon. Anyway, Dragon had never seen this part of the country before and never wanted to see it again. Finally, after riding all day, the bus stopped in the town of Portage-la-Prairie. Had he been able to afford it, Dragon would have given the driver $100 to keep going. Most passengers elected to stay aboard, but Dragon and Benny got off for a cigarette. "Wow, I sure would hate to live here," said Benny, looking around at the sleepy little bird. "Let's go behind the bus station and smoke a couple of rocks." "Huh? I don't got no rock," said Dragon, slightly alarmed. "You got rock?" Benny didn't reply. Instead, he walked around the corner, leaving Dragon no choice but to follow. The small bus station faced the railway tracks, and the only creature in sight was a hungry stray cat with a missing tail. As soon as they were alone, Benny stuffed a rock into a glass stem and put flames to it. "This should make the trip more interesting," he said, inhaling deeply. "I don't have very much, so I tried to save it as long as I could." "I was going to ask about that," said Dragon, taking the pipe. "I ain't never held on to any rock for longer than 10 minutes. He blew a cloud of intoxicating smoke up at the prairie sky and tried to remember he'd ever saved a rock even that long. There was no such thing as leftover crack. "I guess you don't have anything you want to share," asked Benny, inserting another piece of rock into the stem. "It's okay if you don't." Dragon blew out the smoke and a fire engine roared through his head, bells ringing loudly. When the noise subsided a little, he focused on Benny. "I have a tiny bit of junk, dude, but it'll be gone soon, and then I'll be dope sick." He shrugged helplessly. "I thought it might be something like that," Benny said dejectedly. "Well, let's smoke this and get back before they leave without us." The thought of being stranded in Portage-la-Prairie straightened the pair out a little. They finished up and got back on the bus, certain that the other passengers knew they were high. Twitching and tweaking, they took their seats, too gibbled to even look at each other. Dragon was already regretting his decision to smoke rock. He'd have to use more of his precious dope just to get straight again. At last, the bus started rolling. Dragon managed to get his racing heartbeat under control a little and did his best to ignore a number of white specks on the floor. The cocaine psychosis was so strong that he saw the drug where he absolutely knew it could not exist. Crack was great that way. Benny fidgeted nervously in his aisle seat. "Fuck," he said, glancing around anxiously at the other passengers. "I always get the creeps around this part of Manitoba. Just thinking about that guy who got his head cut off a few years ago really freaks me out. How could anyone do something like that to somebody on a bus? Scary shit, man." "What the fuck are you talking about?" asked Dragon, unnerved. "A man got his head cut off? What do you mean?" He didn't like the sound of this at all. "You don't remember hearing about that on the news?" said Benny, amazed that anyone could have missed such a sensational story. Had Dragon been hiding in a fucking cave somewhere? "No, I never heard nothing," said Dragon, wishing he could rewind the conversation so he didn't have to learn what Benny was going to tell him. "I don't listen to the news." "Wow, I thought everybody in the world knew about that psycho who stabbed and beheaded an innocent passenger aboard a Greyhound bus," said Benny, his eyes wide as saucers. "The bus was going through this part of the country in the middle of the night when one of the passengers suddenly stabbed the guy next to him with a big hunting knife. He just kept stabbing and stabbing the poor guy, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. The psycho even ate parts of the poor motherfucker." "Holy fuck," said Dragon in a hushed voice, his face turning white. "How come I didn't hear about that?" His eyes narrowed. "If you're bullshitting me, I swear to God." "I'm not, I promise," said Benny, raising his hands defensively. "It was all over the news. The bus driver stopped the bus and got all the passengers off, but the psycho was still in there with the body for hours. He even carried the head to the front door where the passengers outside could see him." Benny stopped, too horrified to continue. "Eep!" squeaked Dragon. "What if somebody on this bus is just waiting until dark so they can stab us?" I don't want anybody to cut my head off and carry it around like a bowling ball. He snuck a quick glance at the passengers across the aisle. The man in the window seat looked like a serial killer. His glasses and comfy sweater were just a disguise, and he would leap up under cover of darkness to behead them. Dragon could already feel the knife sawing across his neck. This won't happen tonight, will it? Benny asked fearfully. I would have a heart attack if somebody snuck up on me right now. Normally, they would have been able to laugh it off, but the rock made their fear seem very real. Dragon was so frightened that he put his head between his knees. That guy across the aisle was just waiting us to go to sleep so he could kill us, he hissed. Summoning all his courage, he glanced across the aisle again. The man was watching them, he could tell. At that moment, the washroom door swung open and a man stepped out. Hack! Screamed Benny and Dragon in unison. Benny covered his eyes, he couldn't bear to look. The passenger, an old duffer with gray hair and pronounced osteoporosis, looked down at the frightened addicts. What the hell is wrong with you bums? I don't know what you guys are on, but you better smarten up or I'm going to tell the bus driver to put you off. He glowered fiercely, unimpressed with his scruffy fellow passengers. Benny took his hands from his face, embarrassed. Sorry, we thought you were a psycho killer, blurted Dragon, his eyes wild with fear. By now he convinced himself that every passenger on the bus was a raging maniac with a 12-inch butcher knife. He pictured the man across the aisle swinging his severed head by the hair, blood spurting forcefully from the jagged stump. A dribble of urine escaped down Dragon's left leg. He'd literally scared the piss out of himself. What the? Said the elderly coffin dodger. You boys are on drugs, and I'm going to tell the driver. He stomped up the aisle towards the front, his skinny old butt twitching indignantly. Shit, what are we going to do if the bus driver searches us? Worried Benny. I might have a little bit of rock left somewhere. The new problem pushed their other fears to the back burner. While they didn't want their heads cut off, they didn't want to get busted either. Dragon peered up the aisle and saw the old geezer talking to the bus driver, spraying spittle all over the place and gesticulating wildly. Shit, he whispered, his eyes trapped and haunted. Maybe we shouldn't have smoked that rock.